So the topic of tonight is plants and fungi and the great biodiversity we have around us. Obviously, as we try to talk about all life on Earth in a series of lectures, at some point you look at the clock and you say, all right, what can we fit? And I think that the best way would be to start with the fungi, because as a smaller group, like we can make sure we get it in, and plants we could talk about forever, and then we can just look at the clock and say like, we'll budget the time, through there. So let me start with the fungi, and then we'll get to the plants. So fungi are hard to understand, right? So I think maybe to just start off like, well, let's start off with comparing them to what we know, us animals. How do fungi compare? Well, we don't do photosynthesis, so we need to get our energy and our biomolecules from other living things. Now, we absorb molecules, but we animals, we tend to bring them inside ourselves and put them like in our stomach and digest them there and then absorb it. A fungus kind of looks at the world as its stomach, and it just says, ooh, let me grow into the world, secrete my digestive enzymes, and then absorb the good stuff. So me and the fungus, we're doing kind of the same thing, except I brought it into the stomach to digest it there. The fungus is digesting it like in situ and then absorbing the stuff. As an animal, I chase my prey. Fungi grow into them. All right. And so they can't move, but they grow. I have organs and tissues. They don't. They have this mass of these little fibers called a mycelium. Most of my cells are diploid, having two copies of each chromosome. But for sex, we humans and animals make haploid cells, which have one copy of each chromosome. Fungi, most of their cells are haploid with one copy of each chromosome, and they do diploid for sex. All right, so kind of the opposite there. And they have cell walls around their cells. I don't. Okay, so just maybe to get a little frame of reference, compare them to ourselves. All right, let's see a fungus. All right. Well, this is perhaps what makes them hard to understand. This is the fungus. All right. I know a lot of us would say, oh, no, no, let me see a mushroom. And no, no, the mushroom is not the fungus. This is the fungus. What am I looking at? I'm looking at these small little microscopic strands called hyphae, or if you put a whole bunch of them together, we could call it a mycelium. All right, that's the fungus. And if you say, no, 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 I'm used to like the big, um, the big, mushrooms and the like, that's just the fruiting body. So for example, how many fungi do you see? Okay, I'm thinking one. All right. How many fungi do you see? One. Very good. 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 Quick learners. That's great. All right. Same thing here. Like thinking in the animal sense, I'd say, oh, there's five. There's like no, that's probably just one. Because this is what the fungus. The fungus are these microscopic strands that are all in the wood or all in the dead leaves or whatever. And then every now and then they say, you know what, this would be a good place to do a fruiting body, spread our spores. And then so they pop up here and we see the reproductive structure that spreads spores. That's not the fungus. All right, that's just what it reproduces with. The fungus is the mat. Now, that kind of changes everything. Like, so I'm just going to say weird stuff. Here's the weirdest one. Um, what is the biggest organism on Earth? Well, there's the redwoods. There's the blue whales. Not even close. The fungi are. Why? Because the record holder is currently in Oregon. I'm sure they'll someday be like at a record. But if you go over here and you say, ooh, there's like fungal strands in the dirt. Let me do a genetic analysis of them. And you go here. All right, fine. And then you go like a mile or so away, 2 miles, 3 miles. And then you say, like, let me do the same thing. It's the same individual. Like I've read different things on this one. Like, is it 3.5 square miles? Is it 4 square miles? I don't know. It's big. All right. But it's one individual, genetically identical, 4 square miles, the biggest living thing on Earth. Now, once again, you'll see mushroom here, mushroom there, and you're like, oh, all these different mushrooms. Nope, it's just one. It's the same organism. Then it's the same thing. How old is that thing? Well, however we gauge it, it's the oldest living things on Earth. So fungi, they're different in ways which then affect how we view them. But then once again, this is the real fungus, these microscopic strands which form these masses called hyphae. They reproduce with what are called spores, and I don't want to say any more about them because there's different kinds of spores. There's spores you use for sex, there's spores you don't use for sex. One fungus at different stages of its life cycle could make 8 different spores. All right, there's actually a neat one that's at our preserve in Goshen, where this fungus, you'll see a cedar tree that has these like gloppy, goopy orange things hanging from it, and you're like, does the cedar tree make it looks like a Christmas decoration? And a lot of people call it that. I'm like, no, that's a fungus, but it spends part of its life cycle on the cedar, but then a part of its life cycle on apples. So the only way this fungus can complete its life cycle is if you have apples and cedars living close to each other. And like then on the cedar, it has these fruiting bodies and these types of spores. On the apple, it has different ones. So you can have like 8 different types of spores over the course of its life. It's crazy. All right. So I would prefer not to talk about spores, all right? But they are important because we breathe them in and they irritate us. And like they, increase inflammation of the lungs. They're a factor in asthma. And as climate changes, we're getting, warmer and wetter times, we're exposed to more fungal spores. So this is going to greatly affect human health. So I don't want to talk about human spores, fungal spores, their biology, but clearly they're important to us and a major contributing factor of disease. What do fungi do with animals? Oh, so many different things. Let's just quick do a list. First, they can decompose the dead ones, which is good. All right, like I'm sorry, here's my opinion. I think dead individuals should not take their stuff with them. All right, because I'm alive and you see this stuff? The only reason I have like sugars and amino acids are things because I got things that used to belong to other things. I did not invent this biological stuff. All right, when I was little, and I used to be a lot littler, I ate stuff like bananas and hamburgers and stuff. And then I took that stuff and then I got bigger. And then someday I won't be here anymore, but this stuff will now be part of other living things. And like we depend on this cycling of nutrients. Fungi help that. All right. The dead don't get to take their stuff with them. The fungi help recycling it so that the next generation of living things gets stuff. All right. Biomolecules, nitrogen for DNA, energy molecules. So that's great. I love that. Until I realized, wait, if you can decompose I'm sorry, living, no, I'm sorry, switching up my word. If you can decompose dead animal tissue, it's not that big a leap to do living animal tissue. You could cause diseases, and they can. Now, in humans, fungi don't cause major disease. I'll mention a couple. All right, they really affect the plants, animals not as much. But there are some ones that worry us, like bats. I'm sure a lot of you know we don't see as many bats as we used to. Why? Because of white nose syndrome. It's this fungal infection of the skin. Let me tell you a little bit about bats. All right, bats, they like eat their body's weight in mosquitoes a night. All right, but still they're warm-blooded. They have a high metabolism. They usually store up just enough energy to get them through winter. And they say, oh, you know what? How about we all go to a big cave, all of us group together, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of us. Hey, maybe even different species. Let's all huddle together, can share warmth. And just as our energy reserves start to run out, it'll be spring. We'll fly out of the cave. There'll be bugs. We'll eat some more. We'll do that. But now with this white nose syndrome, they're like hibernating and they're like, I can't sleep. I got this itch. And it agitates them. And now they use more energy than they otherwise would have. Just like if you were tossing and turning all night, you would use more energy than if you were getting a sound sleep. And now they're out of energy reserves come February. And they're like, I'm starving. Let me leave the cave, fly out, look for bugs. There are no bugs, they starve. All right. And we've lost millions of bats. And once again, bats eat their body weight in insects a night. That affects lots of things other than just bats. So there's an example where fungi can cause a major diseases. We don't have anywhere near as many bats as we used to. And there's another one which affects frogs. There's fungi which can swim in the water with the flagella. I'll mention them in a second. So these frogs, which spend a lot of time in the water and have thin skin so that they can breathe through it, that's perfect for them. And there's actually a frog species or two, which we think this disease called chytridiomycosis helped cause their extinction. So this is a major thing. In humans, it does cause asthma, and asthma is getting worse, like the spores. But for humans, for the most part, unless like really weird cases. So like you're in a cave and you happen to be breathing in like a whole lot of bat guano where you get all their spores and you get this acute, fungal infection. They don't usually cause lethal things, but they can cause a number of skin irritations. Thrush is a yeast infection that can, especially in infants, can like affect the mouth lining, cause it white, jock itch. Um, and also, if you're immunocompromised, now your healthy immune system may not be able to repel those hyphae, and now all of a sudden causing a bigger problem than we have. I think it's great that cows can digest grass. Good for them. But inside their guts, they have this multi-chambered stomach and like all these intestines. They've got a group of um, fungi called Neocalimystigomycota, which I actually rhymed in the song. I'm just saying that not often done. Um, but in any case, that helps them. All right. So we've got big herbivores because of the fungi which live in their guts and help them break down cellulose. So that's one of the interactions that they have. Some fungi hunt animals. I know that seems odd, but like a lot of animals are microscopic. So here's a microscopic worm, and you see those little strands? Those are hyphae of fungi. All right, so here's this worm, and you ask, why isn't it moving? If you look really close, it's lassoed. All right, it's got a little loop around it, holding it down. It's stuck. So as it was just kind of, moving along in this little wormy world, a fungus grabbed hold of it. Actually, like it formed a little noose, and the worm moved through it and got caught. And now it's going to die. All right. And so if we were to do this a whole bunch, that's the top of the fungi spreading the spores, kind of like the tops of the trees. And if I change the focus of the microscope, we'll then go back down to the bottom. So that's like the ground floor of the forest. What you were looking at a second ago was the top floor. Once again, here's another worm that can't move. And here they are all stuck, and they're gradually, the fungi grow into them and decompose. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, The Last of Us is now coming out with its new season where they do that to people. All right. So, but that show is like, so there's no happy endings in any of the shows. So I'm not going to talk any more about that. So fungi have a number of relationships with animals, as you can see. Fungi have a number of relationships with plants. Once again, they decompose dead stuff, and that's great. So many trees die. There's so much heavy wood, all right, that's dead and sinks into the soil, so many leaves. But those dead plants don't get to keep their stuff, their nitrogen, their carbon. The fungi help decompose it, liberate it for the next generation of plants, or come spring, that the nutrients are available again. So that's wonderful. But once again, if you can decompose dead plant tissue, it's not that far a leap for you to start decompose or digesting living plant tissue. So fungi are major pathogens of plants. All right. So, oh, we'll get to you. Oh, we'll get to you. Where? Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. I'm sorry. I want to go here. I'll go back to you. So this is mildew. What you're looking at the bottom is plant, but looking at the top, oh, that's fungus. All right. So the fungus is thinking, I need energy, I need carbon molecules. Oh, let me just steal them from the plants. So here you see it making its spores. So here are mildews growing on plants. There are other diseases. Some are called rusts. So this is white pine blister rust. This is the plant. This is the fungus growing on top of it. So obviously the fungus is taking from the plant as a parasite. Here it is making the little spores. Dorothy, I'm sorry, I hope you don't have a problem with this. Would you mind if I showed a little smut here? All right, so I'm sorry, I know you didn't sign up for this, but I'm going to show a little smut. This is corn smut. That's a name for a fungal infection here. So here are the plant cells, but that's a fungus. So that's obviously a negative impact that fungi can have. But where do I talk about mycorrhizal? But there's more. So the biggest one, and this is so important, and not too many people know this. If you were to pull up plant roots and you're saying, oh, look at these plant roots. This is great. Let me weigh the plant roots. Like, you're not wrong, but you're not entirely right, because there's fungi there. All of these plants pretty much have fungi associated with their roots in a teamwork, where the fungi send out these hyphae, all right, to absorb water and nutrients and bring it back to the plants, because these little strands of hyphae spread out really far. I mean, 4 square miles. That shows you how far these things can spread out. So they're spreading out all over the place. Oh, and while I'm mid-sentence, welcome, welcome. I think we have enough spare chairs for you, but if you disagree, there's an open room over there. So we got spare chairs, but if you want to grab a few more, you could. So the plants then feed the fungi. So the plants are doing photosynthesis. They give sugar, et cetera, to the fungi. The fungi are then giving water and nutrients to the plants. So they almost all plants have them. All right. For most plants, it benefits them. But a lot of plants, they need them. So like if, I got this exotic orchid, I'm going to try to grow it in my house. Well, it needs certain types of fungi for these extensions of the roots. And if you don't have that, it doesn't grow. Maybe it doesn't thrive, or maybe it doesn't grow at all. So a lot of what we call a plant root isn't plant root. Sometimes it's extensions out of it, but then there's another kind. I think that's over here. Yeah. Some of these actually are inside the plant cell. So here's the plant root. But you see the purplish thing in there? That's the fungus inside the plant cells. So this is such a teamwork thing that the fungi then penetrate the plant cells. The plant cells feed them, and then the fungi send out these hyphae, which bring them stuff. Once again, just trying to point out there's all of these different interactions that fungi can have with things. Okay. I want to just maybe 2 more points, or with fungi, then a little bit about our local biodiversity. Where do they come from? Right. Well, life on land got a late start. All right. So life here starts at least 3.5 billion years ago. But it doesn't get on land until like around here. So the beginning of the purple, like that's the first time life is on land that we can find, but life goes down here in the ocean. So where do fungi get a start? Because when we think of fungi, we're thinking of land, but fungi are in the ocean. All right. What are they doing? I don't know. Like if they're microscopic strands that can be deep, in the sediment, I don't know what they're doing. Like it's really hard to study microscopic strands at the bottom of the ocean. Fungi are there, I'm not quite sure. And there is a group of fungi which is aquatic called the chytrids. I care about them because some of these are causing that chytridiomycosis, mycosis, which affects the frogs. But if you look at different stages of their life cycle, well, I've got it somewhere. Okay, there it is, chytrid life cycle. They make flagellated cells which swim. All right, so here's they have got, like, once again, different types of spores at different times of their life cycle. But so fungi can occur in the ocean, and they can be aquatic. So they're old, all right, before they came out on land, but they're just hard to study. All right, if you find a fossil of what looks to be a microscopic cell, you can tell it was some kind of a cell, but what kind of cell was it? Was it maybe? It's really hard to tell from just like this imprint in rock. So the fossil record doesn't help us much with fungi. When we get to them being on land, there are some neat things. So first of all, mycorrhizae, those extensions which help the plant roots. Do we have fossils of them? Yes. Where do we have fossils with them? With the first plants. In other words, when plants made it onto land, fungi were already there with them. That might have helped them, all right, adapt to land. All right, so we're very happy about the success of the plants. The fungi, they deserve part of the credit. All right, so good for them. If you were to be around, say, early Devonian, what would plant life look like? Well, I'll talk about this in a second. Little things, no trees yet. Like everything's about yay tall or solar. So, not all that impressive. Wait a minute, what the heck is that? Oh, okay, so you got all these little plants, and then you got those things, all right, maybe 6 feet wide, maybe 20 feet tall. That's like a big mushroom. So there was a while where life on land, the biggest things on land, the tallest things were fungi. They're called prototaxites. If you care, I'm sensing a lot of you are good in Latin. You're thinking, wait a minute, isn't that the Latin word for you? And the answer is yeah. When they first found it, they thought, I think this is a yew tree. And it's not a tree at all. It's a big mushroom, okay, essentially. Um, 300.
How did they decide it was a U?
It just like their first cursory look, and like not all fossils have the same quality. Like some fossils are like, oh, look at the pristine quality. I can really make accurate judgments. Other ones you're just like, yeah, kind of. It just making a really high quality observation is impossible. But yeah, like the type of sediment it's in that like determines some of that. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Then I said that I was thinking 350. I'm thinking it's probably 350, 370. My fault. Yeah. It's no, I should have done this. Let's say mid Devonian, because by late Devonian we're getting the first trees, as we'll see later. And I appreciate that because I'm thinking like late Devonian is 350, and I'm like, all right, and I knew it would be just on one side of that. I went to the wrong side, so thank you.
Somewhere that the Carboniferous existed, that the coal was positive because of the lack
Yep.
of fungi. So digesting the lignin, that's not. If they were around in the Devonian, were they just
Oh no. Okay, so no, that's a great observation. I'll totally get there. We're going to talk about trees in a second. I did want to get mushrooms out of the way, but your point. Oh, I love your point. Plants exist for a long, long time, but there are no trees. Then all of a sudden, plants say, "Ooh, you know what? We can make this hard stuff, this lignin that lets us make this like strong upright stems." And then trees cover the earth. All right. But then for two reasons. One, because the real big fat parts of the big continents, were close to the equator then, and were swampy. So that's one reason. This is where we get our coal deposits. And if you've ever had a chance, I love this place. Uh, in Scranton, there's a coal mine that's kind of like a tourist thing where you can actually go down in a coal mine and take a tour. It's really wonderful, just fascinating to do it. But here you are, you're just surrounded by coal, which is the black carbon remains of these dead plants from like 300 million years ago. Why so much that didn't decompose? And you're spot on with that. When plants invented this new hard thing called lignin, fungi probably weren't good at decomposing it yet. And so then, just a lot of it didn't decompose, and then all of this carbon gave us the coal remains which we had today. So, excellent. Fungi probably got better at decomposing plants as time went on. A couple of final things, because I want to switch gears. You have fungi along with you. We call the bacteria the mycobiome, and then we call the fungi the mycobiome with a Y, as opposed to the I, which is the bacteria. There's not as many as there are bacteria, and they're harder to study. So what are they doing? They're harder to study. We're not quite sure. But then even like with human health, to what degree are they influence us? We don't know. But for example, here's just some correlations. You say, let me compare the fungi in the guts of two different populations. Oh, preterm infants to term, people who have cystic fibrosis versus non, COPD versus non, et cetera. And then you can see they're different. So are there some potential applications to human health? There could very well be. And so we carry fungus around with us. In our guts, we do, okay? In our skin, we do. In the vagina, we do. Okay, so there's just the ones which we carry around with us. One final interaction is that if you know what a lichen is, it is half fungus, half algae. The algae do the photosynthesis, the fungi do the protection, all right? And so this is a composite organism of teamwork, half fungi, half algae. And of the roles that they serve, they're very important because they're the first ones making soil. If you start off with bare rock, you can't, like, you put an acorn on a bare rock, it dies, nothing happens. You need soil, but soil doesn't come from nowhere. You have to go from bare rock into something, all right? And so it's the lichens which help do that. All right, so here are lichens growing on rock, and then they develop a little bit of soil, and then you get bigger lichens like reindeer moss, and then you get small plants going, etc. Now, in our area, that's important, but if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about Iceland, because Iceland's just perfect for this. If you go to this one section of Iceland, the newest part, this is all volcanic rock. All right, so what do you find in this one part? Just rock. They're just rock, because it's new. All right, the volcanic activity has just produced new rock. But you start driving in your car, all right, and as you drive further and further away, you leave an area where it's just plain old rock, and you're like, ooh, now there's some lichens, all right, because you have to start soil somewhere. Look at all the lichens, like that. They're starting the soil. There was nothing, and now there are lichens. But then as the soil gets thicker and thicker, you go a little further away. Now you're going to start getting plants coming. And then you'll eventually get to the parts of Iceland which has trees. All right, but it was the lichens which started it off. All right, so when we have new rock, all right, we can't make this into a forest immediately. These lichens are really important. Last thing is, and this would probably be best. I have, all of these are my video channel, which obviously you're welcome to look at. Then there's just all the ones that we have. All right, I'm just going to flip through so you see the diversity. Now, of the ones here, I see a little collar. All right, can you see this little collar here that it grows? We'll get another picture. All right. When you see the little collar, what do you think? Let me get a good one. Anyone? What do you see when you see the little collar? Stay the heck away from it. That's an amanita, and so many of them have names like destroying angel, deadly angel, etc. They're the really bad ones. But then there's all different kinds. I'll just let this play for a little bit here. There are poisonous plants, but the poisonous plants taste horrible. All right, you are very unlikely to poison yourself with a poisonous plant because you'd have to have a sadistic streak in most cases to eat enough to poison yourself. Just tastes horrible. Fungi aren't that way. Your tongue doesn't detect some of their poisons. That's why we have to be really careful, and you have to know what it is you're eating, because there are ones that you can eat that you can find in nature, and there are ones that very often look very similar, which are deadly or could get you sick. There's beautiful. I'm just going to show them. I love the purple ones. They're really cool. All right. So lots of people like, they'll train like, oh, I look for these. Like I look for the chanterelles, and I have a recipe for, with these, and that's one thing. Scarlet brittlegill. All right. Can you eat it? You can. All right. There's another one that looks almost identical called the sickener. So and literally, if you say, how do I tell the good one from the bad one? You peel away the cap, and if you see a really thin pink layer, I think that's the bad one. But again, so I don't eat these. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm giving nobody advice. But a lot of the ones which are edible look a lot like ones which aren't. All right. So it's easy to make a serious mistake. Let me go to not stubble cap. Split gill. Where's split gill? What's this? Split gill's here somewhere. I'll find it. Split gill. Huh? Yeah, these are all from our area. So yeah, it's fun looking. So here's split gill, all right, because their gills have the split. People have eaten those in the United States and Europe, and that's fine. But in both the United States and Europe, then there have been cases where they go to their doctor and they say there's a lump in my mouth, and it's the fungus growing. So they ate the fungus, but then the fungus started to eat them. Once again, this is like just be careful. And very often people just, obviously don't do this unless you really know what you're doing. But if you want to just look at fungi, oh, they're beautiful. They come in all of these colors. They're shapes like stubble cap. And there are some which have gills underneath. They're called agarics. And then there's some which have these pores underneath. They're called boletes. So there's a lot of each kind. This one has a stubble cap. Oh, forgot about this one. All right, so here's a little piece of advice. I'd like to prevent you getting wolf fart disease. Let me explain. So this is a puffball, okay? And the puffball is going to spread its spores through those holes. So if you press it, the spores come out. Now, the Latin name of this, I am not making this up. The Latin name is, what is it, Lycoperdon, which means wolf fart, because someone in Latin a long time ago felt that the odor coming off the puffballs reminded them of wolf farts. But the problem then is, if you put your face there as you're doing all that with a puffball, or your dog does, you can actually get really, really sick. And it's the name of it actually is wolf fart disease. So if you're going to do that to puffballs, don't put your face there. You'll get wolf fart disease. I'll bet you didn't think you were going to hear that. Just the last couple, there's all, this is a mushroom. It's called a stinkhorn. So they have different shapes. There's different groups of mushrooms. Some of them have shapes which we aren't expecting. Some are called coral fungi, having once again shapes. Some are called like worm corals, all right, like these. Some grow out from wood. They're called the shelf fungi. There's a bunch of those. Turkey tail being the, yeah, I couldn't find that. Turkey tail being one here. All right. There's another one that actually is like a black goo that grows on other fungus. It's a fungi which develops, I think it's called witch's brew. And I found it, like, you found a fungus that just has like this black oily like ooze coming out of it. So it just, fungi look weird. All right. And there's all of these different groups. And so all of these are fungi in our area. So as we look at the biodiversity around us, we have a lot of those. But I'd like now to switch, being about halfway through, all right, and talk about plants. So, oh, wait, let me start with this. If you were to weigh life on Earth, so let's do that. All right. Say, all right, so here, viruses would weigh this much. All animals, you put them on a scale, they would this much. Protists would weigh this much. One group of bacteria would weigh this much. Fungi would weigh this much. Notice fungi outweigh all animals. The other group of bacteria would weigh that much. So a lot of bacteria. But I'm obviously missing one. I'm missing the plants. And if you add plants onto the scale, somewhere I do, I swear, it's that. So animals are way down here. That's the plant line. Notice that plants outweigh everything else on Earth. All right. And so if you want to talk about life on Earth, plants. All right. Like plants outweigh everything else. Plants did not always exist. In fact, most of Earth's history has zero plants, zero trees. All right. Even when plants exist, trees come later. There was green algae early on, and green algae adapted to living on land. And if you say, oh, green algae living on land, that's silly. Well, no. I mean, look at your garden. All right, see all the green here? Algae is living on land here. Look at this rock. All right, algae living on land there. All right. And so some of these algae adapted into plants. Now, there's like just so much to say. This is like obviously the really condensed version of this. What did these first plants look like? Well, we do have very primitive plants alive today that look like this. These are called liverworts. Right? Now, they can't grow tall. They don't have true leaves or stems. And they need to be near water. So somewhere there's a picture, you can see it like growing. I find these sometimes when you grow near a stream, like a waterfall there. One of the reasons they need water is their sperm need to swim. And if you're thinking, that sounds weird, I associated swimming flagellated sperm with animals. No, fungi can have that. The chytrids do. A lot of the protists do, like algae can have swimming sperm, and the plants do. Liverworts do, moss do, ferns do, even cycads. These are big gymnosperms that are found in the Caribbean, they do. It's only the higher ones which have pollen, where you have non-swimming sperm in a nitrogenous coat. We'll talk about those. So if your sperm need to swim, then you need to be where it's wet. All right. Also, whether it be them or the mosses, all right, so your mosses, another reason you need to be wet, they don't have what's called vascular tissue. I do, you do. We have blood vessels, so that if something comes in this part of my body, you can ship it to another part of the body through these vessels, blood vessels. Most of the trunk of the tree is vascular tissue because the water's at the bottom, but the water's needed at the top in the leaves that do photosynthesis. So most of the trunk of the tree exists so that the water at the bottom can be transported to the top. And if you know autumn's coming and you want to store energy in your roots, then you can take the sugar from the top and you can store it down on the bottom. So most of the trunk of the tree is for transport. Moss don't have that. They can't transport. So you can't get tall because otherwise your photosynthetic parts are too far away from the water and that doesn't work. So the first plants are what are called non-vascular, the mosses and the liverworts. If you were to say, look at, quote, the leaf, we don't like to say mosses have leaves because they're not vascular. And you say, where are the vessels inside? You don't see any. They're just flaps that do photosynthesis. So about 500 million years ago, Earth has plants for the first time in history. Land is getting green, but nothing's growing tall. All right. So it's just these non-vascular plants like um, uh, like mosses and liverworts. But now we come back a little bit later and we have vascular tissue. This is what I mean. This is a fern leaf. I know I'm not talking about ferns yet, but can you see the tube there? That's where the water and the sugar can be transported. So just like I have blood vessels to transport stuff, plants can too. That's what's called vascular tissue, right? And we get to, thinking here, if we were to go to then the early Devonian, here you can see plants which are growing tall. They're growing tall. I love it. But they don't have leaves yet. All right. So plants will take a while to get to the ones that we see here. So they're green and they're living on land. And they once again, this is the super abridged version. They've got other things that algae don't have, like a waxy covering called a cuticle. I could go on, but just they're green and they live on land. And then you come back, 80 million years later, and they're growing taller. All right, we have vascular tissue and they can get tall. And if you were to look then at fossils, we see these early vascular plants. This is a nice model that I like in the State Museum in Albany, representing life. This would have been probably the very latest Silurian period, early Devonian period. But look at those plants, they're growing tall. Like they're only growing this tall, but still, this is a huge development. All right, trees start from this type of tissue. They have tissue to carry water up, and that's great. How primitive is this? Well, see who's next to them in the fossil? Here's Cooksonia, the plant that's growing tall, and that then is a sea scorpion. Sea scorpions were among the first animals that could like start coming out on the land a little bit. Like they were mostly marine, but they could crawl out on the land a little bit. So here you see them. So plants are growing tall, but they don't have leaves yet. Do we have things like that alive today? Yeah. Here's a whisk fern. All right, whisk ferns, look, they're green, they grow tall, better than the mosses, but they don't have leaves yet. Here's a horsetail. Equisetum, same thing. Maybe it's just a straight rod, maybe it branches a little bit. All right, so plants are getting better. They grow tall, but they don't have leaves. The next big step would be leaves. Now, this was developed twice, we think, and there's two different kinds of leaves. One type of leaf is a tiny little thing because the vascular tissue just kind of pokes its way in and doesn't branch. It's called a microphyll if you care. And these lycopods, okay, these are club mosses. These are modern remnants of this. And if you go to the Bashikil, like one of the best places I know for lycopods ever, you can see this kind pretty common. You can see that kind pretty common. You can see this kind. Sometimes they call them like ground spruce and ground fir. But these were among the first trees. So among the first trees were these lycopods, long before there was oaks or maples or any of the trees that you would know, long before there were pine trees. Club mosses, they were among these things called scale trees because the surface of them looked really different. So if you can see the bark there, that's just like a really different bark. That's lycopods. So when we burn coal for electricity, some of it is the remains of lycopod trees, which were among the earliest trees. Today, club mosses don't grow to be trees. We just get these evergreen plants that grow on the ground. So they have leaves, but it's not like a branching leaf. So that was not the branch that would lead to ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. The other group that says, aha, when we do leaves, we're going to do leaves. All right. So ferns have leaves. And just to be honest, ferns have the biggest leaves. I mean, you could look at tree ferns, you can have leaves which are like 6 to 9 feet long. They're huge if you've ever been near a tree fern. That's like the leaf. These things are like this big. They're absolutely huge. So we still have tree ferns alive today. All right. But back in the day, once again, lots of tree ferns and They helped make coal as well. Okay, now, yeah. Just here's a point. It's a point made in a song, so forgive me. You know I always have to do this. So on your want to hit your head. Okay, the song goes on. All right, but the point that the song's trying to make is, um, for for 3 billion years of life, there are zero plants. Plants appear here in the Cambrian, all right, just fragments of fossil spores and life, and they're like liverworty, mossy things that don't grow tall. All right, by the end of the Silurian, ooh, we're getting vascular tissue that's growing tall. By the Devonian, we got leaves. By the end of the Devonian, we've got trees. But when we look out here, we see like oaks and maples and birches and hickories and like, oh, no, no, no. We don't get flowering plants till here. Flowering plants aren't making trees till here. And the kinds you know don't occur till here. So the point is the plants that used to exist, they were just weird. I mean, the tree ferns, the lycopod trees, etc. So plants take a very long time to get to the ones you know. So let's jump back into the history there. I'm going to say something that's judgy, and this is me, right? I'm a parent, but forgive me. I'm not telling you how you should parent. I'm not, judging others. So let me just kind of say it. Uh, I don't approve of how ferns parent. All right. Because there's different styles of parenting. Once again, I have a bias. All right. So what a fern does is if you were to take this part, that's not a dead leaf, that's a case of spores. You were just kind of like tap it in your hand. You would see like just all these little tiny black dots you could just barely see. Those are embryos, fern embryos. Tiny. How much food do they have? None. All right. So the fern's thinking, if I have like, I don't know, like a couple million kids and I don't feed them, they're mostly going to die. But I have a couple million. Some of them are going to make it. All right. And so that's my style. Have a gazillion kids, don't feed any of them. All right. Some of them will make it, and that's my style. A lot of animals do that too. Like if you look at spiders or like fish, like there are some fish like breeding season, they'll have like 100,000 eggs. Do they feed them? Do they take care of them, protect them from predators? No, most of them are going to die. Once again, if you have 100,000, you could lose a couple and still be a successful parent. That's one strategy. The lower animals do that. The lower plants do that. All right. Higher plants are kind of like the animals. The higher animals, like we mammals, we say, no, we're not, 100,000 kids. No, that's not where we're going. We'll have a smaller number, but take care of them so that each one has a higher success rate. Plants do that too. They have the seed. A seed is an embryo with food. We hire animals. We give food to our, embryos to give them a good start in life. The higher plants do as well. So everything up to this point is reproducing through spores, no seeds. All right. That will then be the next great big step in plant evolution, the seed. Now, there were actually things called seed ferns back in the day. All right. They're extinct now. That's kind of interesting. One of the things I like about the seed ferns is that was one of the things that allowed us to realize that the continents move and the continents were all stuck to each other because somewhere I have a video of this. They were finding the same seed ferns in Africa that they were in South America. And they're like, were these touching at any point? So just crazy thought, but like, studying seed ferns led to this completely unrelated concept, like, ooh, the continents move. That's kind of neat. But today there are two groups of seed plants yet left. I'm sorry, there we go. So if you're following along, all right, algae go way back, all right, before the blue Paleozoic starts. Land plants, all right, they appear first in the Cambrian, but plants aren't growing tall with vascular tissue until you get to the end Silurian here. You don't get leaves till the Devonian, all right, but you don't get seeds until the Permian. All right, so notice that this is 250 million years we're looking at. That's a long time. So plants are developing in stages, all right? And today there are two groups of seed plants, the gymnosperms, which I'll introduce now, and then the last one, the flowering plants, the angiosperms. All right, flowering plants, they don't appear until the age of dinosaurs is halfway through. All right, so just when we look at on the plants, plants have been around a long time, and plants took a long time to get to where they are today. Okay, so if we were to, guess that's back over here again. So gymnosperms we think of as the pine trees. All right, they have seeds. Look at that. That's so much bigger than the like little microscopic thing that a fern would produce. And when dinosaurs were alive and they saw a tree, it was mostly gymnosperms. All right, that was the dominant tree back in the day. There are different groups. In the Caribbean, there are these things called cycads. They look like palms, but they're not. They're conifers. And they still have swimming sperm, which is primitive. There's a plant called ginkgo, which was thought to be extinct, but it's alive today. That's a gymnosperm. For some reason, like they were just found in China, or they were thought to be extinct. And for some reason, they are kind of pretty, but so are lots of trees. But landscapers decided we love this tree more than almost any other. So they decided to plant it everywhere. I'm from Philadelphia, and I drive down Roosevelt Boulevard. There's just ginkgo trees everywhere. You have to be careful, though, all right? Because if you're going to plant ginkgos, you have male trees and you have female trees. You should plant one, but not both. I don't care which one you pick, just don't plant both. And I tell you, because I used to walk to school, to high school, and at certain times of the year, someone had planted on the same block, male and female ginkgo trees, and their, quote, fruit stunk so bad, we would just take a different route and walk different because we wanted to avoid that, it just smelled horrible. All right. So little fact about ginkgos. There's another group of primitive gymnosperms in Africa. Really weird. I think they have two leaves and they get all of their water from fog, I think. Anyway, but apart from that, gymnosperms, they are still alive today. They have cones. They represent the tallest trees, with redwoods and sequoias. They represent some of the oldest things on Earth. Some of the pines are over 4,000 years old. And if you go north, they have an advantage. Their leaves are so thin. A needle is a thin leaf, and there are places where having a thin leaf is an advantage. One, if you say, they must be getting so much water because look at all the snow. No, the water's frozen. Like if you're up north, water is as hard to get as it is in a desert. All right, the only water that's available is frozen. Thin leaves lose less water than broad leaves would, so that's an advantage. Also, if it's going to snow, if you've got broad leaves, after a heavy snowstorm, all of the weight is going to break your branches or take the tree down. If you've got these thin little needles, the snow doesn't take. So while flowering plants have conquered most places, the gymnosperms, they're doing well, especially as you go farther from the equator. All right, we're going to switch real quick, but does anyone know what they are on a pine tree? Good. Okay, those are pine cones. You're thinking they don't look like pine cones. Oh, no, because these are the male cones that make the pollen. All right, there's two different kinds of pine cones on a pine tree. There are male cones that make the pollen, and then there are the female cones where the pollen lands and the seeds develop. So if you look at a pine tree, look close, you should see two different kinds of cones there, the male and the female. Okay, I have more on that, but obviously we are going to jump along. And by the middle of the age of dinosaurs, a new type of plant develops, which is the flowering plant. Now, okay. I want to tell about flowers, but I'm not quite sure you know what a flower is. So if you don't mind, just before we talk, we have to establish what a flower is. Right. So look here. Here we have one of my favorite flowers in our area, blue flag, the iris. This plant wants to have sex with that plant. Problem is, they're on opposite sides of the swamp, and they've got roots they can't move. Can you imagine how frustrating this is? All right, you're looking at each other, you want to have sex, neither of you can move. What can you do? Well, all right, Well, you could then bribe an animal which can move, and you say, hey, you help me out. All right, I'll feed you. All right, so you make nectar or extra pollen that the animal can eat. And you say, hey, let's work out a deal. Now, as I'll get to, different animals like different things in flowers, like bees love purple and yellow. So if you ever see like blue flowers, purple flowers, especially look at the purple lines. This flower is not being shy. It's like bee this way. That's a landing strip. Bee, like follow the lines to where the food is. So the bee comes in, all right, and it gets a free meal. Unbeknownst to the bee, however, plants have sex parts, and the plant rubs its pollen on the bee. Now, flowering plants no longer have swimming sperm. Their sperm are in nitrogenous coats called pollen. So in other words, the plant has just rubbed sperm all over the bee. And the bee then leaves covered in plant sperm and then looks for more free food. It finds another flower, all right, and will go there. And as it gets a second free meal, sperm from flower number one then reach the female parts of flower number two. These two flowers have just had sex. The sperm from flower number one fertilized the eggs of flower number two. Pretty neat trick, given that neither of them can move. All right. So that's a neat trick, and that's common in flowers. And if we were to study the structure of flowers, did I miss that one? Oh, we had a second one. In general, flowers all have this structure where they have a green layer of outer sepals, all right? They're often for protection. So if you get a rose, there's the green little things that look like petals that help protect them. Now, I usually say they're green and protective, but sometimes they're quite colorful, like poinsettias and a number of plants. It's actually the sepals which have the color, not the petals. So, you know, there are so many different, there are a couple 100,000 kinds of flower. I can't describe every single one. Usually the sepals are green and protective, but they can actually be the colorful part. Then you can have petals here, all right, which can have different colors. All right, then you can have the male parts, which are producing the pollen, and then the female parts in the center where the eggs are. And then in pollination, if the pollen lands here, it'll grow a tube and try to find its way to the ovum. All right, so I think we get that. Is everyone good? Okay, question. Or let's imagine, hypothetically, that two people meet, I don't know, maybe at a talk like this. All right, one finds the other one interesting, asks them out to dinner. The other one says, I'd love to go out to dinner. Fine. The one decides, I should now bring flowers on this our first date. All right, but you know, they're late getting out of work. They're like, oh, the place they wanted to get it was closed. They go out and they just find a lawn and they grab like just a handful of grass. And then they meet their date and they say, here, I got you flowers. How's the evening going to go? All right, not well. All right, now I might get in trouble for this. I'm actually going to defend this individual. That person did give the second person flowers. And if you don't understand, it's because you don't know what a flower is. All right. So the definition of flowers does not include looking pretty. All right, a lot of flowers do if they're trying to attract an animal. All right, if you want to attract an animal, animals like the bright colors. These are also flowers, though. Why don't they look pretty? Because they're not trying to be pretty. They're not trying to attract an animal. They are pollinated by the wind. Right? No offense, please don't take this the wrong way. The wind doesn't care what you look like. Just saying. It's going to blow. All right. So whether you're pretty or if you're not pretty, the wind doesn't care. It's going to blow. And so if you're going to use the wind for pollination, why would you waste all of that energy making colorful petals? Why would you make nectar for free food for animals? You wouldn't. All right. So these are flowers, but their strategy is just put your sex parts in the wind. All right. The wind blows. It's going to take your sperm away. And you're just hoping that downwind, by dumb luck, your sperm happens to end up landing on the female parts of some other flower, all right, where now this can grow and fertilize the egg. Now, the first plants, they're wasting all their energy on petals and food for animals. These plants aren't doing that. However, they're wasting their energy making a huge amount of pollen. Sometimes you park your car underneath and it's like covered in this yellow dust because, you know, hoping by dumb luck the wind blows your sex cells on the sex cells of some flower downwind of you, you're going to have to make a whole lot of pollen for that to work out. So my point is, grass is a flower. It doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. It doesn't have to. It's pollinated by the wind. It is a flowering plant. It's an angiosperm. Oak trees are flowers. Maples are flowers. Birches are flowers. Hickories are flowers. Walnuts are flowers. In fact, if you're not talking about a pine tree, all the trees you look at, they're flowers. So flowers are the most diverse plants in the world. And that's an important point that a lot of us, I think might not appreciate. And forgive me, I have so many videos on flowers. I'm looking for one particular one. It's here somewhere. I'll find it. So if you were to say how many pine trees are there in Friends, like 1,000. How many ferns are there? Like 10,000. How many kinds of flower are there? Like 300,000. So when you come to plant species, almost everything is a flower. All right. The things that aren't flowers are really small groups. But this was the last group to evolve. All right. So their origin comes from partway through the age of the dinosaurs in the Jurassic. So they first appear then, and they're these little weedy things. All right. By the end of the Cretaceous, there's some trees like magnolias. Tyrannosaurus rex might very well have seen magnolia trees. Would not have seen like oaks and hickories yet, but would have seen magnolias. Then the dinosaurs die in a mass extinction, and then here in the red Cenozoic, the flowers just take over. And this is when we get like the grasses covering the earth. Although some people study fossilized feces, they're called coprolites. And right at the end of the Cretaceous, there is a paper that said, hey, I'm studying the fossilized feces of these big dinosaurs called sauropods. And I think I see some grass. And if that's the case, then that means the grass started way back here instead of in the red. Now, I hate to like just focus on one plant like grass, but grass is worth mentioning because like the middle of the United States is prairie. That's grass. The middle of South America is like Chaco and Pampas in Argentina. That's grass. The middle of Asia is steppes. That's grass. Grass. Middle of Africa is savanna. All right, that's grass with a couple of trees here and there. Middle of Australia is grass. Grass covers an enormous percentage of the Earth's climate or the Earth's surface, and so it deserves a quick mention. Now, I'm going to wrap up just because. But if you don't mind, let me just kind of give a little, like a hint to help you like want to study, go to that mastodon talk coming up. For a long time, mammoths and mastodons were thought to be one kind of dead elephant. So they were called the same thing. But then the first anatomist, he looked at the teeth and he said, wait a minute, mastodon's teeth, they're bumpy. They've got these bumps sticking up, whereas like elephant and mammoth teeth are flat with like these ridges. All right, the teeth look different. I think I've got two different elephants here, and he called one mastodon. Just a little trivia. Mastodon means breast tooth because this gentleman said the teeth, those lobes remind me of women's breasts. All right, and so mastodon, masta means breath, don means tooth. Just so you know, that's what it means. But why do these elephants have the different teeth? Well, mastodons are old elephants. They were among the first elephants to spread throughout the world. And at that time, the world was warm and wet and had lots of trees. Those lobe teeth are very good for eating leaves. But then as the ice ages were approaching, the world got cooler and drier, and the grasslands spread. So now the world's covered by grass. And you look at elephants today or mammoths, they had teeth adapted for eating grass. So just if we were to look at the age of mammals, which we will, that's a big thing. All right, as in very recent geologic history, our planet's gotten cooler and drier and grasses spread. Grasses are very important. Now we could study the flowering plants because there's hundreds of thousands of them. Just a couple of quick things. One of the things I like is just like all of the flowers are there for a reason. All right, they're not just, ooh, let me add color to the world. No, they want to have sex. And they're saying, how do I best attract the pollinators that I want? So some flowers are not picky. All right, so here, look at this flower. See how accessible the sex parts are? So anything can come in there. Like this beetle can come in there. Ants could come in there. All right, so there are some flowers with very generalized forms. All right, then others are far pickier. All right, where they have specific shapes, like those irises. The irises I showed you earlier. Bees are strong bugs, and bees can like push the petals apart and get at the food underneath. Most insects couldn't. So that purple iris was saying, we only want bees. We're not looking for beetles. All right. We want a specific kind because it doesn't help the plant if I'm a generalized pollinator and I go to this red flower and I get red flower sperm all over my bristles or whatever, and then I go to a yellow flower of a different species and drop the sperm off. So the sperm from flower number one did not fertilize any eggs on flower number two. It was wasted energy. If a plant can encourage um, pollinators to be faithful, to go from one blue iris flower to a second blue iris flower, all right, that's good. So a lot of flowers will do that. Like they have a strategy. I'm not going out for any old pollinator, just some. And so I see there's a question. Let me just get there. Okay, thank you. Um, so for example, this flower says, I want hummingbirds and butterflies. Why? Because it's red. Bees don't see red. All right, they see it as black. And look at the long tube. That's for the proboscis of a butterfly, or the long bill um, of a hummingbird. All right. And so if you look at plants, I mean, they're thinking. It's just not like, oh, let me make some flowers or let me make this color. No, there's a strategy there. Oh, and the strategies are fascinating. So there's all these different kinds of flowers. They bloom at different times of year. So here in early spring, what are you likely to see? Marsh marigold, that's coming up. Dutchman's breeches is coming up. Oh, here's a beautiful one if you get to see it. They're hard to see. Drooping trillium, beautiful, beautiful flower. We have this one growing on campus, trout lily. Beautiful flowers, but once again, early spring is when you have to see them. Now, if you're not out in early spring, you won't see these. And I have a little playlist here with a bunch of things that you will see in early spring. You come back a little bit later, mid-spring, now you're going to get another set. So here's an orchid that we have growing in our area, pink lady's slipper, right? And there's more. So we have flowers blooming in all of these different seasons. And as you look at all the different structures. So look here. So that's the female part. That's the male part making the pollen. Look, this azalea is clearly thinking of like hummingbirds or something. Something that's going to have this long bill, be hovering there, long bill and tongue getting the nectar out. Meanwhile, the sex parts are rubbing the pollen on the forehead of the bird here. So you look at the structure and you see like, oh, I see who you're trying to attract as um, a pollinator. All right. All right. There are just so many other different ways we could go. I'll just do like one or two more. Because everything has a strategy. So once again, there are flowers, for example, that make berries to feed the animals. You're saying, wait, why would you do that? Hey, flower, why are you like doing this? And benefiting the adult or benefiting the animal. And the answer is, okay, especially any students in here, I apologize. Like just I'm sure your parents love you. But just saying. But as a parent, like you want your kids to be successful. Over there. All right. You don't have to stay here. You could like go out, be successful over there. All right. Plants are like that because this plant wants to have all these kids. But if the kids are really successful, what do? They're going to use the water that the adult would otherwise get. They're going to take sunlight from the adult, so that's no good. All right. The parents saying, like, I want you to be successful, children of mine. Go over there and be successful over there. So if you can't move, what can you do? Well, there are ways that you can disperse your seeds. You could have the wind disperse them. All right, so lots of plants do that. Or a lot of them, you could have animals eat your kids. Say, hey, animals, I'm going to cover my kids in all of this food. Eat my children, please. But then unbeknownst to the animal, then the seeds pass through the digestive tract of the animal, are now defecated far away from the parent. And so the parent's saying like, oh, look at my kid, far away now in a little pile of manure. It's going to grow up and be successful and not steal all of my stuff. That's a great thing. There are other strategies as well, right? Some can hitch a ride, like if you've ever walked through the field and you have all these things stuck to your leg, you can transport seeds that way, right? You could float your seeds in water like the coconuts do and say, hey, float maybe for months before you find a desert island to do this. So there's so much going on in plants. There's different kinds of leaves, there's different kinds of stems, there's different kinds of roots, all of which have adaptations. And obviously, people study the 300,000 species of plants for the rest of their lives. And 40 minutes was just enough time to give a little overview of them. So this was just kind of an introduction into the plants. Once again, one of the things I love is just, like what season? Oh, it's now past early spring. It's getting to mid-spring. Look, there's going to be now new flowers, which we see here. Oh, here we are, early summer. There's going to be new ones here. These ones only grow in swamps. These ones only grow in these habitats. So, it's exciting to go out searching for, different kinds of plants at different times of the year, just as it is to do that with birds. So as it warms up, and I swear it will, I hope on your nature walks, not only are you enjoying, the birds and the other wildlife you see, but also the great flowers that you see. And just one last point is I bring this up to my students a lot. We have a great bird watcher in our department, the biology department, Dr. Zarabchik, and he got his doctorate, and he's our avian biologist. What was his doctorate in? Plants. Why would you study plants? Because he was studying the berries that the birds were eating. Once again, most of life on Earth is plants. Everything else interacts with them. All right. And so even if your expertise is birds, you're going to study plants. All right, because that's their food, that's their shelter, etc. So plants are connected to everything else, just as the fungi. Thank you so very much for coming this evening. I hope you have a wonderful night. Once again, there's brochures about the mastodon. I think on some of the calendars, if you're first time here, we have I think less than 10 each of them. If you wanted to pick up a calendar from either the Orange County Audubon Society or the Bashful Area Association, if you want to just take it, great. If you want to leave a donation for either of those, that's wonderful too, but feel free to take those. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. So I'm going to stop recording. Let me just get a quick count. So there's 23 here and 15 on that.
3.5 square mile mushroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's growing.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of doing that? It looked like they're right in the middle of the organisms. Are they growing more pieces themselves? Are they replicating?
So
the same?
yeah, the reason
You know,
I have to study that one individually. Once again, so it's putting up reproductive structures, but remember, a fungus can make up to 8 different kinds of spores. Some of them are, some of them are sexual, some of them are asexual. So what is it doing? I don't know what stage of its life cycle is it like.
But
it
it's
has,
so big.
Yeah.
It wouldn't want competition. But if it's growing something that's,
yeah.
it's growing the new arm or.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I'd have to read up specifically on that
I
one.
was just.
Yeah, so it's
struck
like
me.
in this group, like this one does this on the apple tree, and then does this on the cedar tree, and everything that you learn is just for that one. Like you study its cousin, you got to learn, you got to learn something else. So I'd have to study that
No,
one.
that's
particular.
okay.
Hey, nice to see you.
I saw a kiss from today.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, first time I've seen one in years.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
great. Were you at 6.5?
No,
I saw one at 6.5, but I was I was in water up to I was in the back part.
Oh, yeah.
Kestrels were great.
And more recently than I had in the past.
Mhm.
I haven't seen one in years.